She was digging with her bare hands to bury a baby, until a stranger handed her his shovel. The land was hard that morning, not just dry, not just cracked, but hardened like iron under the weight of weeks without rain. A pale sun had barely begun to warm the cold shoulders of the New Mexico plains, and already it hung heavy with the promise of heat, an unforgiving kind that burned through grief without ever offering comfort. She was alone, alone in every way a woman could be. Her knees were sunk in dirt the color of dried blood, her dress torn at the sleeves and stained from waist to hem in dust and sweat, and something else too sacred to name. The child lay beside her, swaddled in the last clean scrap of fabric she could find, a faded shawl of Mexican weave, worn thin at the edges from years of use. He did not cry. He did not move. His stillness spoke volumes no preacher could match. Her name was Maria Santos, and the world had taken everything from her, slowly at first, like dusk creeping over a desert plain, and then, all at once, like nightfall with no moon. She had walked 12 miles barefoot from the trading post when the wagon wheels cracked. The man she called husband had vanished 2 winters ago, swallowed whole by the copper mines near Bisbee or by another woman's bed, no one could say for certain. Since then, she and the boy had kept each other warm through nights filled with coyotes and cold wind and hunger that gnawed louder than either. Now the boy was gone, and the earth would not open. She scraped with her fingers, bleeding, raw, nails cracked down to the quick, pulling at the roots and gravel with a quiet desperation that made no sound, only motion. Her face, though streaked with dirt, bore the stillness of saints carved in mission stone. It was not madness that had overtaken her, but something deeper, something ancient, a sacred primal need to protect even in death. Behind her, the horizon stretched wide and empty, painted in shades of rust and indifference. No riders, no cattle, no clouds, only that dry, holy silence that made you feel like God had stepped out for a while. The grave was shallow, not even a hand's width deep. She kept digging, not because she thought she could finish, but because to stop was to admit it had all been for nothing. Somewhere behind her, a lone crow landed on a dead juniper, its wings spreading with an audible thump of feather and air. It let out a single dry caw, then went silent, as if it too was waiting. Watching. And then there was another sound, the crunch of boots on gravel. Not hurried, not loud, but real, alive. She did not look up. It could have been a coyote, a vulture, a bounty man. She did not care. The child needed burying. The earth still refused. Then the footsteps stopped, close enough to feel, close enough to matter. A pause. Then the soft metallic clink of a spade striking ground. She looked up finally, and there he stood, a stranger, dust-coated hat in one hand, a long-handled shovel in the other. His face was shadowed beneath the brim, but his eyes were not. They were human, quiet, tired. He said nothing, only knelt, and with practiced motion, he pressed the blade into the dirt, once, twice, until the stubborn earth gave way, until the grave began to take shape, until Maria no longer needed to fight alone. The shovel gleamed once in the morning light before it disappeared again into soil. The sound of earth turning was the only music the plains offered that day. And for the first time in hours, Maria let her hands rest. But her heart, still broken, still burning, remained fixed on the shawl beside her, on the baby who would never wake. He said nothing for a long while. The stranger worked in silence, the kind that did not demand explanation or offer comfort. Each motion was slow, deliberate, like someone who had buried things before and knew there was no hurry in grief. His arms were lean but strong, browned by the sun, corded with the kind of muscle that comes from honest labor and long days under open skies. Maria watched him without blinking, not because she feared him. She was long past fear, but because some part of her, a part that hadn't yet calcified from suffering, was trying to understand what sort of man would stop on an open plain, fall to his knees beside a woman clawing at the desert, and begin to dig without a word. He wore a battered duster the color of ash. Dust clung to his trousers in thick crusts, and his boots had the shine of 100 roads walked not one of them paved. His face bore the pale ghost of an old scar just above the cheekbone, a crooked line that faded into his beard like a trail map disappearing into forest. His eyes were not kind exactly, but they were not cruel. They were weathered, like wood that had seen storm and sun alike. The grave was slow work. The desert had hardened after months of drought, and the sun, now climbing higher, cooked everything it touched. Still, the stranger dug, and Maria sat. Her fingers curled into fists in her lap, trembling, smeared with dirt, crusted with her own blood. She looked down at them like they belonged to someone else. Then, softly, like a stone dropped in water, he spoke. Was it sickness? His voice was low, rough around the edges, like he hadn't used it in days. He didn't look at her as he asked. He didn't need to. Maria took a long time to answer. No, she said, her voice rasping like wind through mesquite. Cold. 2 nights passed. Wind tore the canvas. Couldn't get warm after that. She swallowed hard, her throat raw from dust and crying. He was only a year and some. I held him all night. Tried. He stopped breathing just before dawn. The man nodded once, not with pity, not with disbelief, but with the solemn acknowledgement of someone who had heard such things before. I'm sorry, he said. It was the only thing that could be said, and it landed like a soft stone in her hollow chest, heavy but without cruelty. They worked like that a while longer, he digging, she watching, the baby, swaddled beside her, unmoving. When the hole was deep enough, he leaned the shovel against a mesquite stump and stepped back, eyes lowered. She stood on unsteady legs and moved to the bundle. Her hands, still trembling, reached down to lift the boy, no heavier than a sack of grain now, no warmer than the earth beneath him. She held him to her chest one last time, lips brushing the edge of the shawl. Then she stepped toward the grave and laid him gently in the hollowed earth. She said no prayers. None came. Only silence. The man watched her, and without asking, he stepped forward again, lifting the shovel and beginning to cover the small, still body with soil. Each scoop was quiet, solemn, reverent. Dust rose and hung in the air like incense. When it was done, he pressed the final layer with the back of the blade, then used a flat stone to mark the spot. No name, no date, just a stone set upright in the middle of the nowhere, testifying to a life that had passed like morning mist. The man turned then, and for the first time met her eyes. You alone out here? Maria nodded. She did not bother to lie. There was no point anymore. He squinted at the horizon, where nothing moved but the wind and the suggestion of heat rising off the land. Storm's coming from the west, he said. Air smells like iron. You'll need shelter. Maria said nothing. She looked down at the grave, and her knees buckled, not from weakness, but from the unbearable finality of it. She dropped beside the stone and let her fingers rest on the soil. I got nowhere to go, she whispered. The man stood quiet for a long time, as if listening to something deep beneath the wind. Then softly he said, Then ride with me till you do. And for the first time since her child had died, Maria felt something stir inside her. It wasn't hope, it wasn't trust, but it was motion, and that was enough. They left just after noon, when the wind shifted. It came low and warm from the west, carrying the scent of cracked yucca pods and sun-baked horsehide, and something else, something faint but sharp, like iron scraped across a whetstone. The stranger had smelled it first. A storm. Distant still but walking fast. His horse, a lean, dapple-gray Mustang with a slow eye and a scarred ear, waited behind the ridge where he'd left it. The animal stood like a monument to patience, unmoving under the sun, as if it too had witnessed death that morning, and knew better than to interrupt mourning. He offered Maria the saddle without a word, and led the horse on foot, letting her ride. Her frame was small, almost bird-like with hunger, and she sat with her hands folded in her lap, her face turned to the wind, her eyes unreadable. They walked east toward the jagged silhouette of the Carrizo cliffs, where dusk always came early, and water sometimes pooled in spring-fed rock. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of things neither dared speak aloud. Grief, after all, was a language with no words. Maria didn't ask where they were going, and he didn't say, because it wasn't really a destination, not yet. It was motion, forward, away from the grave, away from the morning. They crossed arroyos carved deep by rains that had not come in months. They passed cacti standing like silent sentries, arms raised in strange benediction. They skirted cattle skulls, picked clean by sun and time, and laid out like offerings to a land that forgot nothing. The land did not pity them, but it did watch, and it remembered. The stranger walked with the loose, steady gait of someone born under open sky. His rifle sat slung across his back, but he touched it not once. His eyes moved constantly, not in fear but in habit, scanning rock faces, cloud cover, birds on the wing. He was a man who had learned to listen not just with ears, but with skin and bone. A man who trusted silence more than speech. Maria studied him as they traveled, in bits and pieces like you study a stranger on a long train ride, careful not to stare, but unable not to notice. There was weariness in him, not the kind that comes from lack of sleep, but the kind that settles deep behind the ribs, the kind men carry when they've seen too much and know they'll see more. His left hand had a scar that split the knuckle like lightning through a canyon wall. His belt bore no ornament. His boots were patched twice near the toes, and on his neck, just beneath the collar, she glimpsed what looked like a faded rosary tattoo, badly done, half erased by sun and time. She wondered what he had lost. She wondered what kind of man offers a shovel to a stranger burying a child, but says nothing of his name. They made camp in the shallow shade of a scrub oak near a dried-up creek bed where coyotes sometimes drank in cooler seasons. The man gathered twigs and set a fire with the precision of ritual, every motion spare, every breath measured. He boiled water in a dented tin pot and handed her a cup without asking. She drank it slowly. The heat cut through her chest like firewood catching. When the stars came out, they came out hard, sharp as nails in a coffin lid, scattered across the sky like bones on a battlefield. The stranger leaned back against his saddle, eyes on the heavens. His voice, when it finally came, was soft. Had a daughter once. Maria turned. She was 3. Croup took her in the high passes, snowed in that year, couldn't get her to a doctor, buried her in a canyon by the Pecos. His words settled between them like dust on saddle leather. Quiet, final. What was her name? She asked. He looked into the fire for a long time. Carolyn. Maria said nothing. She let the name hang there like a wind chime without wind, fragile, waiting. She curled her knees to her chest and closed her eyes. Sleep did not come, but rest did. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped once, and the land, as always, listened. By the 3rd day, the wind had begun to shift again, not with storm this time, but with heat, the kind that burned clean through breath and thought, leaving only the ache of thirst and the weight of sweat behind the ears. They had eaten little, dried cornmeal, a strip of smoked jackrabbit the stranger had pulled from his saddlebag, but water was running thin, and that meant risk. There was only one place left this side of the ridge where the creeks hadn't dried, Widow's Basin, a shallow depression flanked by cottonwoods and flat rock where water pooled from a subterranean spring that hadn't gone dry in 100 years. But it wasn't just the spring that drew the thirsty. It was also a pass-through for cattlemen, drifters, bounty riders, and worse. They approached near dusk. The basin shimmered in the last orange streaks of daylight, surrounded by 6 or 7 horses tied to deadwood posts, heads lowered, sides heaving from travel. A small campfire flickered to the left, half concealed behind brush, and voices carried on the wind, rough, laughing, coarse. The stranger paused, his hand resting on the rifle at his back. You stay close, he murmured. Maria nodded. She had changed in the days since the grave. She did not speak often, but the silence between them had grown familiar, less of a barrier, more of a space where breath and memory could stretch. Her dress was still torn, but her eyes had cleared. Her spine straightened. They led the Mustang down slowly. As they neared, the voices grew sharper. Too much whiskey, too little decency. 4 men, all hard riders from the look of them. spurs still on, guns slung low and loose, like they wanted trouble to find them. One leaned back on a blanket, cleaning dirt from beneath his nails with a bowie knife. Another spit into the fire. One of them looked up. "Well now," he drawled, squinting through the smoke. "Looks like we got company." The stranger said nothing. He walked slow, deliberate, head high. Maria stepped beside him, not behind. They reached the water's edge. The Mustang lowered its muzzle and drank deep. "You always bring your wife to visit?" another man asked, voice slick as grease. "She's not my wife," the stranger said evenly. That was all. One of the men, broad-shouldered, with a brand mark burned into the side of his neck, stood. He was the kind that smiled with his teeth, but not his eyes. "You looking to share water or start a sermon?" The stranger didn't blink. "Just passing through." "Yeah?" The man took a step closer. Plenty of ways to pass. He wasn't drunk. That was the worst part. He was clear-eyed and calculating, the kind that hunted weakness for sport. His gaze flicked to Maria. "You speak girl?" Maria's hands curled into fists. The stranger's voice came low, measured. "She's burying a child." A silence fell, the kind of silence that cuts. None of the men spoke. One turned his face slightly, like shame had crept in uninvited. Another looked away. But the one with the brand just smiled, slower this time. "That's so," he said. "Then let her drink first." He stepped back. Maria moved forward, eyes never leaving his, and knelt at the edge of the pool. The water was cool, clean. She drank, cupping it with both hands. The stranger did not move. He watched them all, not afraid, not challenging, just watching. When they were done, he tipped his hat once. "Much obliged." They turned and walked back to the horse. The fire crackled behind them, and voices started again, but lower now, unsure. They rode off under a violet sky, streaked with gold, the moon rising fat and near full. After a long silence, Maria spoke. "You knew they wouldn't touch me." "No," he said. "I didn't." She looked at him long and hard, and she understood something then. Not all safety is born from strength. Some is born from choice, from showing up, from standing between a woman and a world that wants her broken. They camped that night beneath a bluff where the earth rose like the spine of an old beast sleeping. The wind had died down, leaving the air thick with heat and the smell of mesquite ash from a fire burned low to coals. Crickets sang in the sage. Somewhere distant, an owl asked its ancient question. Maria didn't sleep, not at first. She sat beside the embers with her knees drawn up, hands clasped between them. Her eyes had the far-off look of someone peering through years instead of miles, and for the first time since he'd met her, the stranger saw something shift in her face. Not fear, not even sorrow, but invitation. She spoke. "My husband's name was Thomas." The words came slow, as though she'd had to dig through rubble to find them. "He was a carpenter, quiet, kind. We married under the fig tree behind the mission in Las Cruces. The padre gave us a jug of wine that tasted like smoke. It rained that day. We danced anyway." She paused, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the fire. "He built me a cradle with his own hands. Took him a month, sanded every corner smooth. Said he wanted our child to never know splinters." A silence settled between them. She let it sit. "Bandits came the winter after the baby was born. Thomas tried to fight. They shot him through the throat. Took our mule, our food, my wedding rosary. Left me bleeding in the dirt." The stranger swallowed hard but said nothing. "I buried him under that fig tree, alone, with the baby crying beside me." She looked down at her hands. "2 graves now, 1 too many." The wind stirred then, just enough to move the coals. They hissed once, glowing brighter before fading again. The stranger leaned forward. "My wife died in childbirth. Took Caroline with her." His voice had a different texture now, rougher, as if scraped by years of unsaid things. I was away, chasing down a man who never made it to trial. When I came back, they were already in the ground." He looked away. "That was 12 years ago. I left the badge behind after that. Wandered, tried to forget, failed." Maria's eyes met his, and for a moment something passed between them. Not desire, not even comfort, but recognition, the raw, wordless kind. "Do you still see them?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in faces of strangers, once in the eyes of a coyote staring from a ridge." Maria didn't smile, but something close passed across her lips. "I used to see Tomas in the way my son yawned. Same shape to the mouth, same tired sound." She looked toward the stars. "I don't know where to put all this pain," she said. The stranger reached down, picked up a piece of kindling, and tossed it into the fire. It caught slow, flaring briefly before settling. "Don't think it needs putting anywhere," he said. "It just stays, until one day you realize it's not choking you anymore. It's just walking beside you." They sat like that for a long while, and when sleep finally came, it came not as escape, but as surrender, not to forgetting, but to rest. In the darkness, the fire flickered over their faces. Two people lit from within by memory and loss. The desert held them gently, like hands cupped around a flame. And though nothing had been healed, something had shifted. The road ahead was still long, but they would ride it together. The town wasn't marked on any map, just a name carved into a sun-bleached sign and nailed crooked to a gatepost, Piedra Roja. One saloon, one chapel, 24 buildings weathered soft by wind and time. The street was a corridor of dust where nothing moved fast, except the things you didn't see coming. They rode in together just after dawn, Maria in the saddle, the stranger walking beside the Mustang with one hand on the reins and the other near the butt of his pistol. They weren't looking for trouble, just water, supplies, a place to sleep where the wind didn't cut to the bone. They tied the horse near the smith's shed, and as they walked toward the general store, a voice called out, "Don't see ghosts too often this far east." The stranger stopped. His back stiffened, not from fear but from memory. He turned. A man stood leaning against a post in front of the saloon, chewing a stem of dry grass, hat tilted back just enough to show a scar above his brow and a silver star pinned to his vest. He was younger than the stranger, but his eyes were old. Maria watched the stranger's hands. They didn't twitch, but they were tight. "Didn't expect to see you again, Boone," the man said. Boone. That was the name then, spoken like a thorn pricked through cloth. "I don't wear the badge no more," the stranger replied. The other man grinned. "No, but you left behind quite the mess last time. Thought you were headed north. Thought you were dead." "Sometimes I was," Boone said quietly. Maria stepped closer. The air had thickened. Something unsaid was breathing between them. The man, sheriff from the looks of it, spat to the side. "You never came back after Dry Hollow. Left us to clean it up. Men buried. Boy shot by mistake. Town near torn apart." Boone didn't flinch. "I came back once. No one wanted to see me." The sheriff's grin faded. "She with you?" Maria met his gaze. She didn't blink. Boone stepped half a pace forward. "She rides with me. That's all that matters." The sheriff's hand rested casually near his holster. Not threatening, not yet. "I got folks here don't like ghosts stirring the dust. Just saying. You come in, you keep your head down." Boone gave the smallest of nods. "We don't want trouble." "That's good," the sheriff said, "because this town's got more crosses in the ground than names on the ledger. We don't need more." He stepped back inside. The saloon door creaked shut behind him. Maria turned to Boone as they walked. "Dry Hollow?" she asked. He kept his eyes forward. "Rode in on a tip. Thought I'd found the man who killed my wife. It was a lie. Got men hurt. A child died. I couldn't stay." Maria didn't speak right away. Then she asked, "Did you kill him? The man who gave the tip?" Boone stopped walking. "No," he said, "but I thought about it. Every day for a year." They reached the store. He held the door for her. Inside, the woman at the counter glanced at them, then looked away. No questions, just quiet. Maria picked up a tin of coffee, a sack of beans, a coil of thread. He added a tin of gun oil and a box of cartridges. They paid in coin and silence. As they stepped back out, Maria touched Boone's sleeve. "Why didn't you tell me your name before?" she asked. He paused, looked at her. "Because I didn't know if I was still him." She held his gaze. "You are," she said, "but you're also something else now." That night, they camped just outside town. The stars came out, brittle and sharp. Maria watched the fire. Boone cleaned his rifle, slow and methodical. She didn't ask him what he would do if the sheriff came back with questions, or worse. She just said, "Whatever happens, I won't let you face it alone." And Boone, who had buried a wife, a child, a name, and nearly his soul, said nothing. But something in his shoulders eased. The fire cracked once, the wind blew east, and the desert, as always, remembered. The morning they left Piedra Rocha, the sun rose soft and low, casting golden light across the scrub like it was trying to make amends for all the days it had scorched before. Boone packed the supplies neatly, methodical as always. Maria tied her shawl tighter across her shoulders. The wind was gentle, brushing the dust from her hair like a mother's hand. Before mounting the horse, she knelt at the edge of their camp and pressed her palm to the dirt. Not to mourn, not to pray, just to remember. The grave was far behind them now, lost to the plains. But the pain had not vanished. It had simply changed shape, from fire to ember, from howl to hum. She could feel it now, quieter, buried beneath her ribs like something sacred. Boone offered her the reins. She shook her head. "You ride today," she said. "I want to walk." So he climbed into the saddle and she walked beside him. They rode east, toward a place neither of them could name. Not yet, but both knew it would be green, softer, with water enough for more than graves. At the edge of the basin, Boone paused. He unslung the shovel from the saddlebag, the same one he'd placed in Maria's hands that morning beside the child. For a moment, he just looked at it. Then he stepped off the trail and drove the blade into the earth beside a lone juniper tree, pressed it deep, left it standing upright, its handle catching the morning light like a cross made of oak. Maria tilted her head. "You're leaving it?" Boone nodded. "Someone'll need it," he said. They stood together for a moment, just looking at the tool, so simple, so ordinary. And yet, in another world, on another day, it had been the thing that saved her. Not from death, not from loss, but from having to face it alone. When they rode on, they didn't look back. The desert didn't either. But the wind rose behind them, carrying dust and memory, and the soft echo of hoofbeats over hardpan. They rode on. And if you felt something in your chest just now, if something old stirred while reading this story, then maybe, just maybe, you're carrying something too. And if you are, don't carry it alone. Let someone offer you a shovel. Let someone dig beside you, because sometimes the world doesn't change in a day, but a single act of grace can be enough to keep going. Click the bell button so you never miss another story like this, and may the road ahead rise gently beneath your feet.